Thank you everyone for joining us this morning. My name is Mark Downing. I'm the Business Unit Manager for Palo Alto Networks here at Exclusive Networks. And I'm kind of hosting our PANWire online this morning. I think this is maybe the 8th one we've ran of PANWire. And for those that are not familiar with it, it's effectively an update for our partners on various topics. Today's being around SASE, and it's the second webinar as part of our SASE season that we'll be running across September and October. So in terms of kind of the session today, like I said, I'm kind of going to just quickly do the introduction and then kind of a quick wrap up. The session will be ran predominantly by our wider team. So Adam, Joe and Richie, who's our guest speaker from Palo Alto Networks, will introduce the team as we kind of go along. So in terms of quick housekeeping rules, just to highlight, as these always are, the PANWire will be recorded. We have a sort of landing page where we host all of our recordings of PANWire. So this will be added to that. So it'll be available on demand after the session. So if you've got colleagues that have registered and for whatever reason are unable to join this morning, they can catch up. They can go on there and watch the session. Like I say, all of them are on there covering various topics across the portfolio, partner program updates, and all sorts of different subjects. So feel free to go through what is now really a library of sessions and access them on demand. They are there for you and for our partners, and like I say, lots of different areas covered. So pretty valuable content. In terms of questions, we always welcome those, so please feel free to pop those in the chat box and we'll look to get to those at the end of the session. If we don't quite have time, we'll come back to you individually and answer those questions. Also, for those that know Exclusive Networks really well, you know that we do like to get social. So please, we encourage you to kind of participate with that, share your thoughts on social media, LinkedIn and the like. The hashtags and the relevant tags are on the bottom of the slide here. So, we'd really appreciate you doing that. So in terms of a quick agenda, so like I said, I'll do a very quick welcome and talk about what PANWire is, which I've kind of touched on already to a point. I'll then pass you over to the team who will then go through SASE in regards to the SD-Wan proposition. We'll then do a Q&A with our special guest, Richie, from Palo Alto Networks. We'll then talk in a bit more detail around our new SASE NFR kit and the value in that and how that can be utilised by you as our partners. And then I'll kind of quickly wrap up and go through next steps and relevant events and things that we're running that will be useful to you. And I think for those that joined the previous session and obviously on today, there'll be a few kind of next steps that will be, I guess, good things to consider for you in your SASE journey and more enablement and awareness that we can support you with to help drive SASE conversations with your customers and prospects. So I mentioned this at the start. So we've been running these PANWires for sort of 8-9 months now. I think it's kind of a replacement of maybe sort of a newsletter format. We felt it's a good way for us to communicate with our partners, the relevant updates, the latest messaging from Palo Alto Networks. One thing I've learned, having worked with Palo for over a year now, is they are a very dynamic vendor in regards to there's always new releases, always things changing. There's lots to keep up with. So the idea of PANWire really is for us to allow our partners to do that, for us to give you the latest and greatest. In terms of kind of the audience, we do look to try and position it between sales and tech and marketing as well. So we'd like to think, generally speaking, the content will have relevance to all of those. We try and keep these fairly short and snappy, generally working to maximum 45 minutes, and that's certainly with the intentions of today's session. The idea being that what we'll do is kind of touch on certain areas and really encourage our partners to reach out to have one-to-one conversations if they want to go into a particular topic in more detail. We have a big team here at Exclusive that I'll come on to in a moment, and I would always encourage and drive our partners to engage with us, and we can work with you and have that one-to-one discussion, go into some more detail and pull in specialist resource that we have here at Exclusive and where relevant at Palo Alto Networks to support those conversations and give you the information you need and the support you need to really drive your Palo business. Another final thing with all attendees for today's session and our PANWires, we do have a free gift that goes in the post, so keep your eye out for that as well. In terms of the team, like I said, we're very lucky here at Exclusive in that we've been working with Palo Alto Networks for a long time, probably 12, 13 years, maybe more. The result of that being we've got a very big team. This is kind of predominantly from a commercial perspective, but we do have a big technical team as well, who's headed up by Adam Legg, who will be covering some of the content later. In terms of the sales side of things, the majority of the team are account aligned. So, you know, we have kind of a set list of reseller partners that we work with. However, we do have a couple of the guys in the team that are in more overlay roles. One of them being Joe Collins, who is our SASE specialist and will be speaking in a moment, actually. So in terms of today's topic, you know, Joe is our specialist in that field. So in relation to further enablement for partners, in regards to building out plans around opportunity development, around SASE, and of course, you know, support around deals you have in that space, Joe is our man essentially. So you know, would encourage you to reach out in that vein. From a technical perspective, like I said, we've got Adam, but we do have a big team that work alongside Adam as well. So I think from a technical perspective, I always sort of say we've got what I describe as end-to-end technical services, from pre-sales right through post-sales, and you know, from a support perspective as well. So you know, there's lots we can do to support you as our partners and subsequently your customers from a Palo Alto Networks perspective as well. So without further ado, I will now pass you over to Joe, who will start and go through the SD-WAN side of things. Joe, over to you.
Thanks, Mark. Hi everyone. Yeah, as Mark kind of sort of alluded to, my name is Joe Collins, and I am SASE product specialist here at Exclusive Networks, specifically looking after Palo Alto Networks as a technology. I'm dedicated to specifically the Palo Alto business unit and specifically aligned to SASE. So Mark kind of covered all the bits and bobs I kind of look after. So yeah, please do feel free to reach out. My details will be at the end of this slide deck, so please feel free to reach out. So I suppose what we're here to talk about today, SD-WAN, and what we're talking about here and what Palo Alto talk about is kind of the branch of the future, right? So I suppose I'll start out with a little bit of history first of all. SD-WAN as a category has actually been around for quite a while now. It's been around since, you know, 2013, 2014. It's actually envisioned before that, but kind of first sort of vendors emerged around sort of 2013, 14. So it's been around for 10 years, right? So, you know, but we're now a decade further along from that. The world has changed rapidly, you know, the pandemic happening, changing the way we work, branches, you know, accelerating that digitization piece, and there's, you know, cloud adoption is rife now. AI machine learning is becoming more and more relevant and more sort of investable by lots of organizations, you know, so that they're really sort of these sort of things are taking center stage in terms of what's driving the kind of the branch of the future and generally kind of security, right? And you know, three years ago we acquired CloudGenix, which is, you know, how we decided to build out our kind of SASE, and you know, we kind of did that to predict that branch of the future. So I just wanted to kind of give a very, very high level overview of what SASE is. I did cover it a lot more in detail on a sort of the previous webinar we did last month. So as Mark mentioned, there's some on-demand videos. So if you want to learn a bit more about PRISMA Access and SASE generally, that's the best place to go. But just a very, very high level overview of what is SASE. So basically SASE has three components effectively. So you've got your networking element, which is what we're talking about today, the SD-WAN piece. And then you have usually a user experience piece. Some SASE vendors do, some don't, depending on who you're talking to. That kind of gives that user experience score, all that kind of stuff. And then you have that actual security element, which kind of combines all those features in the bottom right-hand corner, and, you know, SWG and SaaS security, CASBs, things like that, URL filtering, all those kind of things. So you combine those all together, deliver them from the cloud. That in a nutshell is what SASE is. You might hear the security piece referred to as SSE, which is basically just the security element of SASE. So just a very, very high level overview just to kind of give you an idea there. But yeah, we're talking about SD-WAN today. So a bit more kind of history, I suppose. I just want to talk about sort of, you know, that pathway of SD-WAN, how it was sort of envisioned and how it started out and how we're kind of progressing through those kind of the evolution of SD-WAN. The truth is, as it kind of says in there, yesterday's solutions can't solve today's or tomorrow's challenges, right? So most legacy solutions that have been around haven't changed too much, don't really work for the way that we work today. That with that branch transformation piece, sort of cloud apps being now sort of taking a real prevalence, AI, machine learning, we need to sort of adapt and evolve. So yeah, basically what I'm saying is, technology that were built in the 2010s no longer work for today's environments in the 2020s. So as I said, a bit of history. When you think about traditional routing and traditional data centers, right, there are still lots of customers that are operating in this way. They're still relying on, traditional routing models. They have all their branches hooked up to routers, which then put all that data back through the data center, usually primarily using things like MPLS lines, right? Maybe leveraging internet a little bit. This architecture, as I said, is pretty much all directing that traffic to the data center, where all the security is hosted, all the inspection security is there as well, and that traffic then goes out to wherever it needs to go, whether that be back to another branch or whether that be out to the SaaS or internet applications, whatever it happens to be. This particular model is it's really very hairpinned, and it's causing a lot of rigidity in the customer's environment. It's constraining, and also it's very, very expensive. You have to incorporate security at the branch, security in the data center, and those are quite heavy, bulky devices potentially to provide that level of security. And that's basically part of the reason why initially SD-WAN was implemented. You can see some points there, move away from some of that reliability on MPLS because of the costs associated with it. SD-WAN is obviously has that encryption built in natively as well. And usually these SD-WAN was much easier to manage and make changes on the go. So then we move to the next evolution of SD-WAN, which we define as sort of the generation 1 of SD-WAN. And that a lot of people and a lot of vendors out there are still providing solutions that we would categorize as generation 1. So I suppose all of the things in the center of the circle are things that potentially you can kind of ask your customer if they're important for them, and if they, what's driving their adoption and their need for SD-WAN. Things like that backhauling architecture. Are they wanting to do that? Do they really need to do that? The reasons for that being that predominantly most applications now don't actually reside in the private data center. So what's the point of diverting that traffic back to the data center when you can just route the traffic directly to where the application resides, i.e. diverting it straight to a cloud delivered security service and providing that security measures there, right? And then you have that direct access to those applications. And also because of the backhauling, trying to define SLAs for those different branches depending on where they are, it's very, very difficult for customers to do, so they have no guaranteed level of performance. That active support piece is quite key as well, because if you buy two devices that are going to sit in pairs, if that one is never in production, there's the backup unit that all of the traffic will fail over to, then you're having a device that's sitting there you pay thousands of pounds for that is doing nothing, right? Whereas we're basically trying to shift to active where both devices can be used in tandem with that backup potential as well. There might be delays in failing all that traffic over to another's device. It's very, very manual potentially to do that, and also because it's not in production consistently, that traffic can take time to move over. And that intelligent traffic steering, actually monitoring things that are more granular than just sort of standard network parameters like jitter, latency, packet loss. It actually can fail to identify if the application where it resides, if it is a cloud or internet application, it doesn't really understand if the problem is on the application server layer rather than just a standard networking problem. So if you do have a problem, how do you actually remediate those issues? And obviously we kind of alluded to it slightly already, but actually being able to secure that traffic as well. As we said, it kind of requires bolt-on security to actually provide those levels of security, whether that be in the branch or in the data center, providing large kind of stacks of infrastructure. Companies are looking to be a lot more agile with their approach nowadays. With COVID as well, kind of driving a lot of that. They're not looking to get into long, heavy lease agreements, which are expensive. So they're looking to be a bit more agile, deploy something that's quite a thin device. So that's basically kind of what they're trying to do. And just another kind of quick stat for you on these Gen 1 devices as well. There is some direct app connectivity for these devices, but only 50% of these applications are actually accessible by the Generation 1 SD-WAN vendor. So that means you're buying a device that potentially you're not actually going to be able to directly access your applications for, which doesn't make sense. You're making an investment and then not, actually getting all the bang that you need for your device to do. So there are some key things that are sort of driving this SD-WAN adoption. Number one of this is we talked about lots on these sort of PANWires, and it's hybrid working, as we know. Most organizations working hybrid work models where they, employees are wanting to have that flexibility to work from home, but also, there is a drive to get employees back into the office more often. And obviously users want to have exceptional experience and kind of collaboration, whether they're working from home or in the office. So it's kind of, bringing people back into the office, to work with that hybrid model. You need to have exceptional experience in the branch as well. And kind of that direct to app model and sort of services that are being delivered from the cloud now. Without that direct to app access, delivering services from the cloud can be quite complicated, or if not impossible. So yeah, a lot of organizations are now trying to deliver those services to make collaboration hubs, things like that, for employees to work from. And the last thing is IoT traffic being unencrypted, very difficult to maintain. I'm going to talk about IoT in a bit more detail a bit later on, but that's kind of a real key driver to sort of, we're seeing lots and lots of people delivering various different amazing ways of deploying IoT. But yeah, I'll talk about that a bit later. So in terms of our solution for SD-WAN, we talk about it in 4 pillars, basically. The foundation to that is the elastic. So the elastic network piece, right? So actually having that foundation to provide flexibility, capacity, and then availability as well. Secondly, we talked about it already, but defining SLAs for applications has become really, really critical. Delivering proper business, optimization goals for companies. They want to ensure that their users are always getting an exceptional experience, especially for those business critical applications, and actually being able to define business policies against those specific applications. Thirdly, a zero trust security piece. That's kind of obviously basically our PRISMA Access integration, which is our security piece. I'm not going to talk too much about PRISMA Access today, because as I said, I did talk about it quite a lot in the last one, but we will touch on it slightly. And then the AI powered operations piece. Nowadays you have to have deep embedded automation, observability, just to make things data operations much easier. And so teams can be a bit more proactive, have a thinner footprint potentially, all these kind of things, right? So firstly, I'll talk about elastic networks in a bit more detail. You might notice on the left hand side there's some kind of bullet points which kind of summarizes these things. So these slides, so you can always look at them later in future and kind of look at the points. But so I suppose foundational to SD-WAN, you have to be able to combine multiple connectivity methods, right? So you need to be able to have broadband internet connectivity, satellite connectivity, 5G, and then MPLS. Even though some companies are trying to move away from MPLS, you can still some organizations still want to lever MPLS, but you want to be able to do that in a fluid manner and an active manner. So we fundamentally built our SD-WAN starting from the application layer. That means that we can actually build business policies for applications that include any of the above WAN links for all applications. So, that means that PRISMA Access can distribute traffic across all of these things based on bandwidth availability, capacity, performance. So, you're no longer having to stick to one technology or one another or make a decision where something goes. You can kind of dynamically use all of these things in tandem. So the next point is, it's not just enough to be elastic. You actually have to be resilient as well. So PRISMA SD-WAN offers an availability model that actually preserves 100% of WAN connectivity to the branch, even when a single device is down, using this active model. So this is a very quick example. Say we have 2 WAN connections set up here. We have, connection A going to device A, and then you have a connection B going to device B. Say that first device A goes down. If that device was a legacy router or a Gen 1 SD-WAN solution, it will take down the WAN link associated with it. So that means you're having that link that's down, you're potentially going to have to manually then move over to another device. In our case, device A can go down, and 100% of that WAN capacity of both WAN A and WAN B can both be utilized by device B, and that's possible because basically every SD-WAN on device has some basically what's called fail to wire capability, so it can natively kind of take all that traffic and run it seamlessly, right? So there's no potential there's less time of downtime, less risk of downtime, I should say. And then finally, all these networks, all your networks out there have to be brought together to establish an actual network fabric. Connecting all your branches, connecting the data centers, connecting to the cloud, giving access to your applications. To do that, historically, you've had to, deal with a lot of routing complexity, which is, very, you have to have a real in-depth knowledge of routing technologies. Many times, over the last couple of decades, the complexity of these environments has just got massively, more and more complex. So what we're trying to do with PRISMA SD-WAN is actually ensure that you can build out your network with little to no routing and basically making it as easy as possible to actually, provide this connectivity that you need for your organization. So we have a centralized controller architecture, which is basically used to automate the end-to-end connectivity. So it builds kind of a full mesh overlay, and it manages and updates the network topology, and it can automate all the complex routing operations seamlessly. So you're no longer having to manually configure these things. The architecture controller automates all of this, right? Again, leveraging AI and machine learning. So the second piece is app-defined fabric, about assuring that you have that SLA model. So SD-WAN does this basically by looking at things other than just standard metrics like latency, jitter, etc. We actually look at things like application response times, fingerprints, traffic density metrics, and VoIP quality, so voice or video quality. That means we can on the fly, make sure that particular session always has the right amount of bandwidth associated to it, and it can always just, define when there's a particularly bad application performance, whatever. I'll talk about that a bit on the next slide. I'll give you an example. So we kind of mentioned that voice quality. So the system actively monitors the quality of that voice to identify if it starts to degrade. So if an MOS score starts to fail beyond a certain acceptable threshold, it will intervene and it will seamlessly kind of transition that to a different connection to ensure that the user always has a good experience. That's kind of what we're saying by, when we say network SLAs is not enough, it's actually important to ensure specific application SLAs as well, right? Thirdly, we talk about security. We've established you need that elastic network. You need the ability to ensure user experience and application performance. So of course, you need to ensure that all of that's done in a secure manner. We use PRISMA Access for this. I'm not going to talk about too much about the specific features of PRISMA Access today, but more kind of the integration. So how do PRISMA SD-WAN and PRISMA Access all come together? Well, we unify all the management, policy, data all together. So natively all your policies are there together. So all your security and your networking is all in one solid layer platform. When you set up your SD-WAN box, it will automatically identify what is the nearest PRISMA Access egress location, so you don't have to kind of manually look for this, build, type in IP addresses, all these kind of things. So basically it will establish that secure tunneling straight away to that PRISMA Access location without causing any latencies, and it won't adversely affect any user performances. Usually actually when customers do connect to this, they tend to find that it actually improves their performance. And the IoT piece I want to touch on a bit more. So basically what IoT does, what IoT the capabilities can do is, when you think about defining IoT, you have to potentially install incremental agents or products that are needing to be deployed to define what your IoT footprint looks like. But PRISMA SD-WAN can natively kind of actually pull the information from the LAN and then send that information to PRISMA Access. It takes that information, provides things like auto classification for it, so it can identify all those devices on the LAN, provide that auto classification, and then actually go, this is what we actually recommend that you set up the policies for these devices to ensure that, again, you're not having to do this manually. It's not an in-depth process. It's really, really annoying. But again, all that's leveraging AI and machine learning to actually provide that power. So it's a really, really cool tool. I think it's quite useful. And then fourthly, the AI powered ops piece. So lots of the market are looking to make massive investments in AI and machine learning. It's kind of one of the things that, you know, lots of the market is really moving towards, to sort of provide that automation piece, and, you know, getting to the point where there's as less manual intervention as possible. So I suppose let's have a quick look at the sort of things that we can do with our solution there. So it breaks down into two buckets here. So you have the observability piece, first of all, you know, because you can only actually manage and intervene on what you can actually see. And then obviously we have the AI ops piece. So firstly, I'll talk about the observability piece. So I suppose this is what you know, an average customer's potentially network can look like, right? It's all kind of potentially fragmented. They're not using single vendor. They have what they maybe define as best in breed in certain areas, but there's no collaboration here, right? So if you think about an average support case, a big amount of the effort actually goes into gathering the data from all these different sources. And obviously, because they have that fragmented environment, it's then very difficult to pull all this and actually define where a problem maybe resides. So let's say you had that mix and match problem. Where do you even start to sort of, you know, identify a problem? Different vendors and deployments mean basically a slow time to respond, and any response, you know, it's actually difficult to find where that problem stems from. You might be getting tickets and from every location, and trying to find and to sift through that to figure it out is very difficult. So that's basically where PRISMA SASE comes in, and ADEM. So, you know, it can disambiguate where along the line the problem is if you have our solutions in all points, right? So, you know, you can disambiguate if it's a LAN issue with a Wi-Fi, is there a WAN issue, is it an application server issue, is it an ISP issue? Because, you know, ADEM can be natively integrated with all this. You can see across multiple WAN connections as well. So, you know, and also with PRISMA Access, you're then looking at everything in the middle mile as well. So you're hitting the branch and all the way to the application, right? So it's, yeah, it's really powerful when you have that collaboration piece. I suppose just as a very quick example, this is what the kind of interface looks like. You can see, you know, the green branches are all good. All the performances for those branches are great. When you have a SD-Wan box, your branch will appear on this. So, you know, you can see that some potentially has some degradation when they're red. So you can kind of actually see at a very high level, right, these branches maybe need some intervention. And then you kind of go down to the next level. And then, you know, you get all this kind of really intuitive information, which kind of says, you know, if one of the icons is red, you know that potentially is where your issue stems from. So you could kind of disambiguate. If you have multiple WAN links, you can actually go, right, that WAN link is actually performing particularly badly. This is what we need to focus on to fix. But, you know, in the meantime, all your application traffic that are business critical still goes through the one WAN link that is up, for example. It natively sort of reroutes and then says, by the way, there is still a problem with one of your WAN links. So it kind of, you know, feeds that back. And then the operations piece, you know, we talked about sort of AI and operations and automation, but, you know, it really kind of assists with the detection of network incidents, provides proactive analytics, which can actually detect things ahead of time. So it's not just a sort of break fix situation. You're now actually being proactive into your network and kind of troubleshooting prior to things happening and being proactive, which is really critical, right? And you can then sort of diagnose that problem and correlate multiple events into one ticket. So, you know, we've had instances where, you know, tickets have drastically come down, so that, you know, rather than having 100 tickets to look at, you just look at one and solve that one, right? And then you can provide that, it sort of provides that remediation assistance as well, right? So it doesn't just let you fix it yourself, it can actually give you recommendations how to fix that, best practices, all that kind of stuff. So I suppose just to sum that kind of up, basically sort of let all those alerts into one event, identify the root cause. You can then do things like playbooks, so you can automate the responses in future. So if you have a problem that's recurring, you can set up a playbook where you just execute the playbook. That resolves it, and then, you know, that prediction is really critical as well. Proactivity is really key. You know, you don't want to have a team that's constantly being reactive. And I suppose one of the last points here, you know, we were announced as the only leader in single vendor SASE by Gartner. Gartner were the ones that obviously defined SASE as a sort of architecture, and we're defined as the only leaders in this space. So it's if anyone sort of says to you, well, why Palo Alto, you know, you can just sort of say, look, they're defined as the leaders in this market. There's a reason for it, right? And I suppose on the last one, I'll just quickly summarize some of the points we've covered. So yeah, in conclusion, you're getting that comprehensive security, has native integration with our PRISMA Access tool, which provides that security. You know, you have that application optimization piece, so you deliver those SLAs. You know, you have that global network connectivity piece. You know, it can create, you know, global interconnected networks that can seamlessly connect these branch data centers and cloud resources together. Active deployments is really, really critical now. It makes sense, right, to use all the money you've spent and invested in these devices. Being more ready for that cloud adoption, digitization, direct access. Simplifying the management console, right? One pane of glass management for SD-WAN, PRISMA Access, ADEM as well for that digital experience management, and also next-gen firewalls as well can now be managed as well, saving on costs, and then allowing that scalability piece, right? You no longer have to deploy heavy architecture into branches, potentially just an SD-WAN ION device could fulfill that need, right? And then also having that built-in sort of redundancy and failover capabilities to ensure that your network is never interrupted and cause any downtime. So yeah, I think that is pretty much everything today. So yeah, thank you very much for taking the time to listen today. I've put my details on the email, my email on there. So if you want to ask any questions or have a chat afterwards, I'm more than happy to. So please do feel free to. I suppose I should probably introduce the next speaker, which would be Richie Fry. I won't do a proper introduction for you. You can sort of introduce yourself, but basically we're going to do a bit of a Q&A session today. So we had a couple of questions that have been popped in to us today to kind of talk through today. And I thought it'd be nice to sort of step away from the sort of the PowerPoints and slides, etc., and have a bit of a hopefully interactive Q&A session. So Richie, over to you to introduce yourself.
Yeah, hi, thanks, Joe. So, hi everybody. I'll keep it really brief. I'm Richie Fry. I am the channel SE at Palo Alto Networks, and I support our distribution partners like Exclusive Networks. So I think we've got some questions actually, haven't we, Joe? I think you're
Yeah, so we put them up there, but I'll obviously just kind of, you know, ask a couple of questions and you can kind of give us your thoughts, really, I suppose. So I suppose generally we talked about kind of the pandemic and COVID-19, but what do you think that affects, you know, how that affected kind of SD-WAN and adoption of SD-WAN, et cetera, et cetera? So
it's an interesting one because I think it probably flies against the grain of normal thought, because I think everybody assumes that, you know, for the whole of SASE, the COVID-19 was a great boost, but actually, for SD-WAN specifically, during the pandemic itself and the lockdown, it was probably a negative, right? SD-WAN didn't have that immediate shot in the arm that remote connectivity solutions got, such as VPNs and ZTNA solutions. I mean, if you think about it, if you had a remote connectivity solution that got you from your home to your data and your apps during the pandemic, that was probably the easiest way to make money since probably the millennium bug, right? But the problem with SD-WAN, of course, was that it's primarily an office-based technology, and we had no one in the office. And then enterprise started to sort of reassess perhaps timelines for projects they had. They'd reassess the number of sites that they were going to have in the future, and people began to wonder, you know, just how much real estate the future of work was going to require. And remember, when we were in the middle of it, we wondered if it would ever end. We had no forecasts as to when things were going to change. So that was the short term. However, overall, I think it was probably, or clearly was, a long-term accelerator, because that forced remote working. What that did was accelerate cloud and digital transformation, right? And ultimately, you know, when you come back to the office, SD-WAN fits that type of hybrid model that SASE obviously was you know, built to address. So I think during lockdown, many in-flight SD-WAN projects probably stalled. I mean, remember, you couldn't get in your office, you couldn't even drive to your office to even install the hardware, right? But in the background, the case for the environment, if you like, that SD-WAN addresses was being accelerated, so that when we came out of lockdown, then we'll have definitely seen an overall sort of positive impact.
Great, thank you for that, Richie. I suppose moving on to the next question in that case. I've talked about it a little bit already, but I suppose from your perspective, what do you see as the kind of the main things that are driving adoption of SD-WAN?
So I think, I mean, as you just said, I think you probably did point to a lot of them, if not nearly all. But I think probably the main reasons for that driving business, primarily, I think the first one would certainly be, and it'd be no surprise, that cloud and digital transformation, right? That movement of applications to the cloud. that wasn't really ever catered for by traditional routed MPLS networks. They lack the bandwidth, they lack the latency, or so they add the latency through that hairpinning. And of course, by that, what I mean is, so we explain what we mean by that. That's sending potentially your data 1,000 miles in the wrong direction to the data center before turning it around for it to access the internet. So that, I suspect, would be number one. And number two, again, this is something you touched on: network performance, right? Enhancing network performance, resilience, elasticity. Okay, because SD-WAN's an overlay technology, so it is actually agnostic of the WAN technology underneath. So that means it's fairly limitless, actually, in its ability to use whatever type of WAN technology or WAN connectivity that you want to use. So as well as the obvious ones, traditional MPLS and internet, then we can start to look at 5G, Starlink, for instance. We've got, endless possibilities. And remember, just as you said, Joe, these can be bonded together to create, sort of bigger pipes, increase performance, and also be used for resilience. So, a modern day site might have a raw internet link and an MPLS circuit and a 5G circuit. And also, as well as improving performance, then this is also fairly future-proof technology in that respect. Carrying on that sort of message of flexibility and agility, it's not just the WAN choice, right? SD-WAN provides organizations with, I think, greater flexibility and agility in managing their networks. Because it's a centralized management and it's got centralized control, that allows for quick and efficient provisioning, the configuration, policy enforcement across any number of sites, right? And that, I think that ability allows business to react to changes, to scale more efficiently, to onboard new sites. So mergers and acquisitions, for instance, that becomes infinitely easier, as does new site opening. If you think about today, with a good SD-WAN solution, then a branch can be up and running in minutes, perhaps an hour. Whereas, when we were talking about provisioning a branch with MPLS, then we were talking weeks and months. Another one is cost efficiency. Now, in the early days, I'd probably said this first. It was certainly, the strongest driver from the vendors, particularly from over the pond, right? I mean, there would certainly be a claim of 90% savings on MPLS by replacing them with internet links. And I think perhaps that figure was always slightly inflated anyway when applied to the UK market, but it was probably true that significant savings were certainly available. But I don't think that's anywhere near the primary drivers now. Enhanced security. So, with the rise of that sort of cloud hosted applications and data in the cloud too, then ensuring robust network security, that's quite challenging using traditional methods. So SD-WAN itself incorporates advanced security features, encryption, firewall capabilities, etc. But the reality is the true security play here, certainly in the case of a single vendor SASE, is that native integration into cloud delivered SSE services such as SWIG and CASB, DLP, etc. A really obvious one is going to be improved user experience, because SD-WAN sort of prioritizes, as you very eloquently said, prioritizes applications, optimizes network traffic, and that ensures consistent, reliable user experience, right? We can dynamically adjust those network parameters such as bandwidth allocation, the traffic routing, which link it uses. SD-WAN is able to maximize minimize latency and packet loss and jitter, and maximize the bandwidth, right? And that's going to result in improved application performance and ultimately user satisfaction. So I think the next generation of SD-WAN solutions and you touched on this, can not only identify applications, but they can actually visualize that end-to-end performance of the transaction, including what's happening on the application server itself, right? And that's going to lead to a far superior user experience. I think lastly, on that point, I think visibility is another big one, right? If we when we start to think of next gen SD-WAN solutions like PRISMA, then ADEM, that's autonomous digital experience monitoring, will bring significant enhancements to not only to user experience, but to that NOC and SOC engineer experience as well. So having that integrated visibility right from the end user device all the way up to the application server, feeding that into an AI engine, that's going to bring new levels of understanding of network performance, and it's going to bring automation that will include auto remediation of some of these faults. So if we talk about that in real life, so I was reading a use case the other day. It was Aaron's, and Aaron's, they had lots of issues, but the issues that they primarily wanted to address were bandwidth and connectivity issues. Same with most people, right? They had a lack of visibility to end user experience. All they knew was it was bad. And they also lacked agility. They'd opened a lot of stores and they lacked agility when they were opening them. It took a long time. Also, they'd stalled on their Office 365 migration as well, which is a story I've heard many, many times. So they needed a solution that was centrally managed and would have some self-remediation capability if the network performance took a hit. So they put in PRISMA SD-Wan. Now, the first thing they found was it took them less than half the time to deploy that they thought it would, right? And that meant they were able to accelerate their own project, their own plan. Another astounding statistic was that, and actually you touched on this as well, Joe, was they reduced their WAN trouble tickets by, and I find this staggering, 99%. So they went from something like 3,000 tickets a month to less than 30. They found, as you'd expect, a dramatic improvement in latency, right? That's really not surprising. And that's going to happen the moment you remove that hairpinning, sending the traffic the wrong direction, you're going to get an amazing improvement in that latency. And consequently, end user experience, right, rockets up. So that's allowed them also to complete site backups, which was something they were not able to complete in the past. They kept stalling. So I remember another stat as well, and that was something like they were able to do some like 1,500 or 1,300 point of sale systems in 27 minutes. They're able to upgrade them, something that was a real big project for them before. So I guess in summary, that one is a pretty dramatic turnaround, and that's by deploying SD-WAN. And to be honest, it's a fairly familiar tale.
Great, thank you for that, Richie. I think that use case is a really powerful one. And if anyone needs some more examples around use cases and stuff like that, then the specific industries, then let us know. We can help you sort of look into that and give some more context around some of your particular aligned end users, for example. So I suppose on the next question, are there any kind of myths and misconceptions in the SD-WAN kind of era that you kind of want to disambiguate now?
Yeah, I think there were an awful lot in the early days, but I think there's still some flying around. I guess the main ones I would think of is that the first one being, and I kind of touched on it, that SD-WAN's all about saving money. And I think, like I say, in the early days, I think it was probably the first slide. It was the primary driver, particularly, as I say, in North America. But where I think that delta in cost between MPLS and internet services was probably even far greater than it was here, and it is here, even though that does exist. So I certainly remember delivering slides where the opening message was 90% saving on MPLS. Right? But I'd say now that cost savings secondary to that sort of, for all of the reasons that we've just talked about, the improvement of the end user experience, ending hairpinning over MPLS and securing those apps and data via more appropriate SSE solutions. I think another misconception would be that SD-WAN is just an MPLS replacement. And actually, I should probably file that under not strictly true, because SD-WAN, as I said, it's agnostic of the type of circuit. So it's actually perfectly valid to run an SD-WAN solution over MPLS, right? I think, however, the vast majority of deployments will involve either the partial or more likely nowadays complete removal of MPLS circuits. I can distinctly remember that when I first started working with SD-WAN in 2018, most of the deployments we did, most of the conversations, they were an internet circuit complementing an MPLS circuit. But I think as time passed, it's become more common for people to go internet, and perhaps sort of a 4 or 5G backup for resiliency. And lastly, and hopefully this will be of interest to the audience, I heard this many times, particularly in the early days, was that SD-WAN deployments will remove the need for a managed service. And I can see why people think that, but that's certainly not been my experience at all. In fact, it's kind of been the reverse. So whilst SD-WAN makes it easier to manage the network, it still needs managing, right? And I'd argue that centralized nature of the management actually makes it easier to outsource to a third party, and things like role-based access control, etc., can help create a better managed solution with far greater visibility for both the customer and the provider. And of course, that answer stretches out to deployment and integration services as well.
Perfect, thank you for that. And I suppose lastly, we've talked about what kind of SD-WAN looks like now, but how do you see this moving in the future? What do you see as the main kind of, next best thing that's going to be, to watch out for? So
I think we're at that stage in the life cycle of SD-WAN where it's going to enter that next gen phase, and a lot of it, Joe, you have mentioned today. It's that phase like we've seen with now we start to see with ZTNA 2.0. Right, I think anyone looking at SD-WAN now needs to look at vendors who are going to offer an application centric rather than a network centric solution. And we need to be careful here, because everybody will say they're application centric, but I don't just mean recognizing an application and then treating it differently. That's table stakes now. But what I mean is look at an application flow and being able to identify where delay exists in that transaction. Is it a network issue, or is the delay actually caused by processing time on the server itself? And that's fairly advanced visibility, to be honest. It's not new, right? That sort of visibility has been available with expensive specialist solutions for quite a while, but getting it natively integrated into SD-WAN, that's new, and to be honest, for me, an absolute killer use case. Secondly, and I think this won't surprise anybody, I think the use of AI is undoubtedly going to influence the development of SD-WAN more and more. So ultimately, the thing is, AI lives on data, and if you can enrich the data feed into its ML engines by including the application server performance that I just mentioned, the network performance data, and the endpoint performance, well, suddenly you've got that completeness of telemetry that will allow SD-WAN solutions to make more intelligent decisions, but also for, in the case of generative AI, to give operators an easy to understand picture of the network and to sort of automate remedial action. Where we all want to be is where an operator comes in the morning, switches on his terminal, and he gets spoken to and says, morning, Dave. Manchester, Birmingham, Liverpool, they've all experienced network issues on their BT 100 meg circuits, right? I've created a ServiceNow ticket, here's the number, and I've logged a fault with BT. Right? And all of that done for you. That's really where we be, and I don't think that's very far away at all, if I'm honest. And I guess lastly, and I think we've seen actually this by and large happen already, but I think that standalone SD-WAN vendors, maybe not disappearing, but most of them being acquired, at least, enterprise in the future as well. I think they won't look at SD-WAN in isolation. They may deliver the project and they might purchase in isolation, but they will look at it as part of an overarching SASE strategy. Hand in hand with that, I think enterprise will look at vendor consolidation. Obviously, that's a massive message at the moment, and therefore, I would say the single vendor SASE solutions will become much more attractive, right? I mean, I have a slightly biased view on that, given the slide that you showed that we are, Palo Alto Networks holds that unique position with Gartner as the only sort of single vendor SASE leader. But I genuinely believe that's the way the market's going.
Great, thank you, Richie, and I really appreciate your insights and taking the time today to have a discussion around this. It's really good that you made some time there. So hopefully that was useful for everyone to have a bit of more of a conversational talk on SD-WAN. So I suppose next of all, I should introduce Adam Legg, who is our resident techie, and I'm sure he'll want to introduce himself. But yeah, basically you're going to talk about the NFR lab. So yeah, Adam, over to you, mate.
Thanks, Joe. Yeah, Adam here. Resident techie, that is my new job title. Thank you for that. Yeah, so I'll introduce the NFR lab to you, I guess, and why we've built it. I guess lab equipment, it can be quite an investment for partners to make, especially as you might be early on your journey with SASE. So you kind of want to take that burden away from you. We have taken that burden away from you. we've done it. So you can, your SEs, your pre-sales team can, one, get more familiar with it, two, use it as the demo system to show, you know, Joe talked about networking, user experience, SD-WAN, that's all within this lab. So, you know, you can use us, your SEs can get more familiar with it to give customers that demo, that full morning Dave experience, as Richie called it. So moving on, I'll just go through a little bit of more detail. So I guess what's unique about this is we're going to give you full access, read-write access. That will mean that firstly, we're going to provide some scripts, or secondly, we'll provide some scripts so that there are some use cases already out of the box that we can onboard you in, we can onboard your team in, and they can follow those use cases through to show things like securing internet security, securing SaaS, securing private applications as well. Secondly, if there is a use case particular to your customer that you want to show them, that's where the full access comes in, and either your team, if they're capable, can configure that and show that use case, or will assist in setting up the rules, the policies, etc., that might be required to, you know, prove to the customer that yes, we can do what you want, and potentially skip that requirement for, you know, proof of concepts, proof of values, because we can use our lab to prove it. So that'll be, you know, effectively a much quicker turnaround time. It's fully licensed, so as you'd expect, there is SD-WAN in here. There are CASB type capabilities, the whole ADEM for user experience, and all the security features that you'd expect that, you know, PRISMA Access offers in conjunction with SD-WAN. Moving on a little bit more to SaaS security. Now, we spoke about SaaS applications living anywhere, particularly SaaS. You're using Teams today. So this is going to be included in part of the NFR lab as well, so you can show how we can improve that SaaS experience, control access to risky applications, and, you know, protect data, well, it's in transit or through API to those sanctioned SaaS applications, and then block that like that sensitive data to those unsanctioned applications. All part of this setup. The next part that is enabled by default will be ADEM, or the whole user experience. Right? We talk about identifying if there is a user experience issue, identifying where that is. That's where ADEM will come in. There will already be, this demo system is widely used by the Teammate exclusive and plenty of partners out there. So if you don't want to necessarily install and generate some particular data for your particular use case, there'll be plenty in the interface already just from what other users, myself for example, have generated. And say ADEM is obviously goes across remote user use case when someone's working at home, show them how we can allow them to fix their own issues if there's sort of a problem with their own local connection. But also extends out to the branch as well, and as you can say, as the slide says, extends to any application. And then also included in the NFR lab is, of course, SD-WAN, what we're here to speak about today. So we've already got branches and data centers set up. It is integrated into PRISMA Access, so you can show the security piece on top of SD-WAN, and very shortly it will be integrated into the single consolidated sort of SASE cloud management that is coming very soon. So next steps for anyone on this call who is interested about it is probably to contact me. What I'll do is I'll set up a session with your tech team. We'll get them onboarded, we'll get them access. We'll make sure they're comfortable with how to use it as well. I'll also just suggest if you want to do that, and you should do that, contact me. Also include our Palo Alto team just in case I'm on leave or something, and then it can be routed to the next best person to get your team onboarded and set up that initial sort of walkthrough session with them. And of course, they can do regular revisits with the team to make sure their skills stay sharp and just help them with their help them with their knowledge. So reach out to me. I expect at least 1,000 emails off the back of this webinar, so I look forward to it. And with that, I'll hand over back to Mark.
Thank you, Adam. Appreciate it, and thank you, Richie and Joe as well. Yeah, just a very, very quick wrap up from my perspective. Just wanted to sort of, I guess, highlight next steps, other events and things we've got running very quickly in regards to the NFR lab that Adam was talking about there. We are running a small incentive for our partners in relation to that, essentially whereby we will be providing or giving £250 worth of flight gift vouchers per demo, so per customer demo that you are running between now and the end of January. So a little incentive there. I think, you know, it's customary in this industry to do that sort of thing. But I think, you know, based on today's session, based on what Adam's just said, I'm sure you'll all see the value in doing that. We are here to support you with regards to that. So as Adam said, reach out to him, reach out to the team to help set things up. And yeah, like I said, there's a bit of a bonus in regards to doing that, up to 5 per rep, so you can earn yourself yeah, enough to fly to a lot of locations around Europe and beyond, I would suggest. Next thing, just to give you a bit of a heads up, I suppose, as mentioned at the start, this is the second webinar we've ran as part of our SASE season. For those that are kind of embarking on a bit of a journey with us, for those that are looking to delve deeper in regards to all things SASE and working closer with myself and the team around SASE and driving that message amongst your customers and prospects, we are going to run a face-to-face event in January in regards to kind of SASE and going into further detail, focusing a bit more on the discovery phase of kind of the sales cycle, and other areas that I won't read off the slide, but, you know, give you a further awareness of you know, what we can do, what Palo Alto Networks can do in that space, and effectively how we can drive that business in regards to SASE. So no date just yet, but it will be middle of January at the Palo Alto Networks office in central London. So just a heads up, you will receive further correspondence over the next week or two in regards to that, again covering both sales and technical. So yeah, will be of benefit, but with benefit and of interest to the majority of people on the call. Also, just a heads up for the technical people on the session, we have our next technical boot camp that we run being held on the 5th of December, again at the Palo Alto Networks office. So just wanted to give you a heads up on that date. You will receive details of how to register shortly. But yeah, again, great feedback for partners that have attended that in terms of you know, kind of getting hands-on with SASE, and up, and we'll share the information of timings shortly. And final one, the next PANWire online, so that's being held the 23rd of November. This particular one will be more core text focused, focusing on XIAM, which is a bit of a hot topic at the moment. So again, just a sort of heads up on that. We will have information on registration for that shortly. You know, we've had great feedback from our partners around these sessions. So yeah, that's the next one. Just wanted to kind of put that out there. And that finishes today's session. Just want to see, you know, I think we are running slightly over. So what I'm going to say is, for those that have asked questions, we will reach out to you directly to answer those. If you do have any, in the meantime, I know contact details have been shared already, but again, the Palo Alto Networks email alias is on the screen. We always encourage our partners to engage with us. So if you've got anything specific or any follow-up questions, you know, just drop us a line. But yeah, just wanted to reiterate, thank you again for joining us, and have a good rest of the day.